Hey guys, it's Alex, and today I'm here with a book review for A Dream About Lightning Bugs by Ben Folds. This is a nonfiction memoir of Ben Folds' life. I don't really know how else to describe this book, it's just his memoir. I gave this 3 stars, and a lot of this review is just going to be me discussing my disappointment in this book. And it's not even that this book was terrible, because it wasn't by any means. I did enjoy it, I did think it was very worthwhile, I did like reading it. It's just I had such high expectations for this book. I love Ben Folds. Well, let's go back to a different starting point because I do love Ben Folds. But I read Anthony Rapp's memoir Without You in the beginning of January of 2019. I read that in 2019. It was 5 stars for me. It was amazing. It touched me like so deeply, and I really loved that book. It was one of my favorite books of the year. I read this in January of 2020, and I wanted to have the same feeling towards this book. I really thought I was going to love this, that it was just going to be one of my favorites of the year, and that I'd start off the year so well and just like give this an easy 5 stars because I adore Ben Folds and I thought I was going to adore this book, and I didn't. It was fine. It was interesting. I learned new things about him, which I'm very grateful for, and the information I got from this book was very worthwhile, but I didn't love it. It was just kind of fine. It was 3 stars. I'm glad I read this, but it didn't have a huge emotional impact on me, and it didn't have much lasting impact at all. So, to start with my history with Ben Folds, because I do feel like when you're discussing a memoir of someone, discussing your history with that person and how attached you are to them is kind of relevant to the review. Ben Folds was my first concert. I went to his concert when I was 13. My older sister was a fan of his. She went with some of her friends, and she took me along because she was way cooler than I could ever be. And it was so much fun. Like, I mean, I was 13. It was my first concert, and like, if you've ever been to a Ben Folds concert, that's a pretty dope first concert. And I knew who he was, and I'd listened to his music a lot. Not a lot, some, but I wasn't a huge fan of his. And then, like, after that show, huge fan. I'm 26 now, so I've literally been a fan of his for half of my life, and I've seen him in concert a few more times. He's fantastic. I love his music. I keep up with his music. He's one of the only people who, like, I still get excited when they're like, new album. Most people who I've followed for this long, I'm like, oh no, like, you're going further in this direction I don't like. But him, no matter what he does, whether it's like classical symphony stuff, like, because he's like a conductor, not a conductor, he's the artistic director of like a symphony or an orchestra or something right now, and he does a lot of like that kind of thing with his pop or with his rock, with whatever genre he plays. I'm not really sure. I think it's like rock, but he plays a piano, and it's like very interesting. Like, no matter what he does, I love it. He's never done any music that I'm like, that's not good. He's done some that aren't my favorite, but none that where I'm like, that's not a good song, that I don't like at all. And I love him. I love his lyrics. I love his music. I love his personality. And I thought all of that was going to translate so well into this memoir. And it just didn't. To start with the positive, I guess, the main positive of this book that I have is his personality. He has a great personality. He's very, like, honest. He's very straightforward. Like, I'm sure, like, he's a celebrity persona, you know, to some degree, even if he's not like as big of a celebrity as like Beyonce or something. Like, he still has a celebrity persona. I'm not pretending like I know him, but the personality that his persona has is very honest, very straightforward, very down to earth, and it comes through very well in this book. Like, he comes across as a very genuine person, and I believe that persona of him. Like, there are some people who have personas, it's like, okay, like, that seems a little bit of a put on, but whatever. Like, I'll take it. I like that persona. I like that you're doing that. With him, it feels real. Like, he's a person who feels very real. And I've always liked that. And I really like that in this book because he does do such a good job of shining a light on his personality in this. Because he's not always been the greatest of people, and he's never tried to hide that. He's never tried to, like, hide his mistakes. Like, in the moment, sure, but like a year or two removed, he'll be like, no, like, I screwed up badly there. Like, that was a terrible thing. And he does that a lot in this book where he'll be like, I made a really selfish, crappy, immature decision here. Like, I was being just crappy overall, like a terrible person. And he was very honest about that. But not only that, he was honest when he was that kind of person and it helped his career. And he was honest about that too. He wasn't trying to gloss over the fact that sometimes the immature or selfish things he did actually helped him in the long run in terms of his music career. And he made a point of that throughout this book. He would be like, "Yeah, like I did this terrible thing that like was really crappy to this person I cared about, but it helped my career, and that's why I did it." And it still was not a right thing to do. Like I regret that kind of because my career is important to me, but like it was a bad thing. Like I was 25 and I shouldn't have treated another person like that. And I really liked that because it was just like very straightforward, very honest, like not trying to hide or sugarcoat anything or be like, well, I made this terrible decision and I learned my lesson from it because terrible things came to me. He's like, no, I did a terrible thing and it actually helped me in the long run, but that doesn't make it any less of a bad thing that I did. And I really appreciated that. I thought it was well done in this book. And like maybe that is just him pretending, but it doesn't come across that way. And really all I care about when I'm reading books like this is how it comes across. And it came across as so genuine. But let's talk about where this book fell flat for me. And I think mostly it was that I felt very disconnected from him. I read memoirs, or I read anything really, because I want to get invested in the main character. I want to care about their life and their story and what's happening. Like, I want to be invested in the main character. And memoirs are really no different from that. Like, it's true. But I still want to be invested in the person who's telling the story of their life because that's what a memoir is. They're still essentially just the main character of their own life. And I never felt connected to him that way. I never felt invested. Like, obviously, I cared already because I care about Ben Folds, but it was always kind of a drag to get through. Like, I found myself having to force myself to pick this up. It took me like a week to read, and it's not a super long book. It was just, I never really wanted to pick it up. I never felt like it was like, oh wow, this is great. Like, I care so much about this. That was something I really loved in Anthony Rapp's memoir, was that I felt emotionally connected to him and emotionally connected to the story he was telling. But with this memoir, with Ben Folds, I didn't. It was like, okay, like, cool information. It's cool to know like how your band started because I'm a fan of that band. But it didn't do anything more than that. It wasn't like, wow, like this is really like touching or like this is something that really makes me like connected to you. Like I wanted to connect so badly and I didn't. One reason I think I didn't connect was because of how little this book focuses on his personal life. And I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this so that it doesn't just look like I'm looking for gossip or something like that. A lot of this book focuses on his career, like his music, like his relationship with music is the central focus of this book, and it follows that. Everything that's happening in his personal life, he'll mention at some points, but he never focuses on it or really delves into it deeply or gives it that much time or attention. It's just kind of like, well, that was happening. Like, oh, I got married at this point, and like, my wife was a cool person. We got divorced later. And it would just be like throwaway lines like that. So much of this was just about his career. And I really wanted more of his personal life. I wanted more of his feelings about his life. The easiest way for me to illustrate this is to talk about his marriages. I don't want to seem like that person who's just looking for the gossipy, awful, sordid details because I'm not. But he's had 4 or 5 marriages by this point. I don't remember the exact number. And he talked about some of them briefly, but like very, very briefly. One moment he mentioned only in that he wrote a song with her name in it because she never had a song written for her with her name in it and she didn't think like her name was good for songs, so he did that. And then like literally in the next paragraph he was like, yeah, we got married when like this album was being produced and like by the time the album was done we got divorced, the end. And that was literally all he mentioned of her. And it's not that I want the sordid details of like all his messy divorces or anything, because I don't, but I want to connect with him on a personal level. And it wasn't just about his marriages, that was just an easy example, but it was the same with like his parents or his siblings or his friends or even his bandmates to a degree. He never discussed his relationships with them because he was so focused on like discussing his musical career, which again, I'm very interested in. That's why I picked up the book, because I'm a fan of his musical career. But I wanted so much more than that. I wanted to know more about his personal life, his thoughts, his feelings, his fears, not just when it directly related to his music. And to a degree, I get that he was like, I'm a workaholic. Like, I focus so much on my music that, like, my personal life is it kind of falls by the wayside sometimes. But it didn't feel like that was what was happening in the book, or that he was using that as like a device within the book. It just felt like he wasn't really talking about his personal life, which made it hard to connect with him personally. And I just wish there had been more of that. I'll also say that at times it felt like he was very much focusing on surface level things, like even about his musical career, that as a fan I already knew about, and I would expect the majority of his fans, or who the people who care enough about him to read this book, would also already know about. Like, he devoted entire chapters to both Rock This Bitch and the Fake album. And it's like those are both very basic things that if you're a fan of Ben Folds, you know what both of those things are. And I'm sure, like, if you're not a fan of Ben Folds, you have no idea what I'm talking about here, but that's fine. Basically, Rock This Bitch, he was playing a show once, and some dude in the audience was like, Rock This Bitch, and on the spot, he just created a song that was titled Rock This Bitch and sang it. And at, like, not every concert since, but it's become a thing at his shows that he does at the majority of his shows. Someone will shout Rock This Bitch, and he'll just compose a random song that has, like, nothing to do with anything except it has the line Rock This Bitch somewhere in it. And, like, that's a thing that he does, and it's a very common thing. And he spent an entire chapter just discussing that and just being like, this is the origins of how it happened. This is, like, what it is. This is how I feel about it, which is that it's a cool thing and a cool way to express musically. And it's like, that was it. There wasn't anything deeper to it. There was no, like, extra information. It was just this kind of basic thing that most of his fans would already know and be aware of. And it was kind of disappointing to just sit there and read this chapter of, like, there was nothing new that he was adding. It felt like filler. And there were a number of things in this book that were just kind of, he tackled them on a superficial surface level, where he would be like, oh yeah, this is the thing about my career. Let's explain it, how it came to be, what it is, how I feel about it in a very basic way. And then it'd be done. And I really wanted him to go deeper than that and just, like, I didn't need, like, long explanations of very basic things about his career. I don't think many people reading this book would, because I do feel like if you're a fan of Ben Folds, like, enough to be reading this book, you already know all of those basic things about his career. You know what the Fake album is and, like, how he felt about it, because everyone literally talked about it for, like, a year straight. Like, I remember the Fake album coming out and everyone, like, losing their minds over it. And it was just like, there were a lot of things in this book that he just covered on the surface, and I wanted a lot more. I think this is pretty much what this whole review is. I just wanted more from him. I wanted him to really open up. At one point, he mentioned, like, at the very end of this book, when he was wrapping everything up, he was like, oh yeah, like, at one point when I was on tour, like, a few years back, I was having such bad panic attacks that I had to, like, go to the emergency room and get prescribed drugs for them. And I was like, dude, you never mentioned that. Like, when it was happening in the context of the book, like, when you were covering that time period, you never mentioned that. And, like, that's a big thing to not mention and then just, like, throw away in, like, a few lines at the very end. And there was a lot like that where it was like, wow, like, I really wish you had delved into that and delved into your feelings about that. And I get, like, not wanting to be, like, too open about, like, personal things that are kind of, like, traumatic, basically. Like, not super traumatic, you know, but very personal, touchy issues. I get that. But, like, when you're writing a memoir, that's the kind of thing where you do have to open up to a degree. And he opened up some, but it's just, a lot of it did feel very surface level. So that I was glad for the information, but I wasn't, like, really caring about the stories he was telling. One of just the formatting things I didn't really enjoy was that this book felt a lot like a series of chronological vignettes. Each chapter was only a couple pages long. He told them very, very short stories. A lot of them didn't really connect in any way. It would just be like, here's a topic. Here's 3 pages on this topic. Here's a new topic. Here's 3 pages on that new topic. And, like, that was how it was with, like, Rock This Bitch. It was like, Rock This Bitch. Here's what it is. Here's what I feel about it. Like, 3 pages of that. And then it just ended and he would move on to something new. And that was a lot of this book, and I really don't enjoy that kind of storytelling. I like long form. I like when things are very cohesive, when chapters are very long, when you spend a long time just, like, discussing things. And this book was very much like, here's, like, the chronological events of my life. I hit on everything that I deem is important to my musical career. The end. Have a good one, guys. And it's just like, I don't really like that. That's just something I don't enjoy. I didn't think it worked super well. It just seemed like an easy way for someone who's not I was gonna say novelist, but obviously writing a memoir isn't like writing a novel, but who isn't like a long form book writer. That words are hard, but he writes lyrics. He hasn't written like a book or anything that's like as long as a book before. It seemed like an easy way to like do it for someone who's used to a shorter form, and I just didn't particularly enjoy that. But even with all my negatives, even with like every negative thing that I said about this book, I still think it was worthwhile. Like, if you're a fan of Ben Folds and you were thinking about reading this book, I definitely recommend it because there was just a lot of new information in here that I was like, that's cool to know about one of my favorite musicians. Like, I care about him already, so going into this book, even though nothing in this book made me care about him, I was already coming into it with some level of like, I'm invested. So that did help. And I don't think, if you're not a fan of Ben Folds, this book super isn't worthwhile. I would also say if you're a music person, he does discuss a fair amount of like music theory because he's like, I wouldn't call him a musical prodigy, but like he's a hardcore musician, like in the classical sense and in like the musical sense. I don't know. I don't know anything about music. And he does discuss like musical theory and his relationship with music and like how he was trained and he went to college for music and he learned jazz and like that was something that he learned very early on and a lot of his like foundation is jazz music even though he is now a rock musician. He's the artistic director of a symphony and like he does discuss how all these things relate and like music in general. So I do think if you're a music person, there is more for you in this book than there maybe was for me, because he does focus so much on his like musical career. But if you're not a music person, it's still worthwhile just because like he's Ben Folds. Like if you like Ben Folds, read this book. There's a lot of good information. I don't think you'll hate it. I can't imagine a Ben Folds fan hating this book just because it's so him. Like if you're a fan, you know his personality, and this book is very much his personality, just kind of irreverent and funny and like down to earth and like he's a funny person and he's like a very insightful, interesting person. So even though I didn't love this book, I did still really enjoy it. I do actually plan to listen to the audiobook sometime soon in the next few months. I have it on hold at the library. I'm thinking I might enjoy it even more listening to the audiobook. Like, and even if I don't, hearing Ben Folds talk at me for like however many hours it's gonna be, I feel like is very, very enjoyable, even if the content of the book is nothing super special. Let me know down below if you've read this book or if you are a Ben Folds fan and what you thought of it, what your favorite song of his is, if you know him, because he is really one of my favorite musicians. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see y'all again soon.